You do not usually notice the exact moment your foot touches the ground, but your brain does. 40 milliseconds before your eyes fully process the room around you, pressure sensors beneath your skin have already predicted whether your body is stable, whether the surface is dangerous, whether your next step will collapse your balance before you consciously feel anything at all. And yet, for millions of people, this prediction system is slowly going dark, not because of injury, not because of disease, because the brain has quietly stopped listening to the feet. You can see the consequences everywhere. People in their 20s already losing toe mobility, adults in their 40s developing stiffness they call normal aging, older people walking slower, not because muscles disappeared first, but because the nervous system no longer trusts the ground beneath them. The strange part is this: most of this decline begins long before pain, long before diagnosis, long before anyone realizes the map is disappearing, because hidden inside your feet is one of the densest sensory networks in the human body, a biological terrain scanning system so sophisticated that modern robotics still struggles to replicate it. And modern life has been starving it of information for decades. The result is not just weaker feet, it is cortical silence, a shrinking territory inside the brain itself. And once you see how this system actually works, you begin to realize something unsettling. What felt like aging was partially sensory deprivation. Your feet are not passive structures. They are sensory organs disguised as body parts. Inside the sole of a single foot are more than 200,000 nerve endings, tiny mechanoreceptors buried beneath layers of skin, fascia, fat pads, and connective tissue constantly measure pressure gradients, vibration frequencies, skin stretch, joint angle changes, and microscopic shifts in terrain texture. Every step generates a storm of information. The brain receives data about force distribution measured in milliseconds, heel impact, arch deformation, toe flexion survey friction, temperature Vallone asymmetry. Even the texture of concrete versus soil changes the firing pattern of receptors traveling through the tibial nerve toward the spinal cord. Most people think walking is controlled by muscles. It is not. Walking is controlled by prediction. The nervous system is continuously forecasting instability before instability occurs. Your body solved this problem before your conscious mind even noticed it. And to do that, the brain requires a detailed internal map of the body, what neuroscientists call the somatosensory homunculus, a strange, distorted representation of yourself folded across the surface of the cerebral cortex. Hands occupy enormous cortical territory. Lips occupy enormous territory. And feet once occupied far more than modern humans now use, because the brain does not preserve territory for information that never arrives. Unused sensory maps begin to blur. Edges dissolve. Signals weaken. Eventually, the nervous system starts treating certain areas of the body like abandoned land. This is where the mystery begins. Because evolution did not design human feet for flat surfaces, or rigid support, or identical repetitive terrain. For nearly all of human history, every step was neurologically rich. Roots, mud, stone slopes, temperature shifts, unexpected textures. The foot evolved as a dynamic sensor array interacting with chaos. 26 bones, 33 joints, more than 100 muscles, tendons, and ligaments functioning together like a responsive suspension bridge. The arch itself is not rigid architecture. It is adaptive tension, a living spring. With every step, fascia stretches and recoils, storing elastic energy like a compressed bowstring. The plantar fascia alone can experience forces exceeding 2 times body weight during walking. Running multiplies this dramatically. But the most important thing is not force. It is variability. The nervous system requires variation to remain calibrated. Small unpredictabilities sharpen sensory resolution. Tiny corrections maintain neural precision. Your balance system depends on errors. Without errors, the brain stops updating the map, and modern environments remove the errors. Perfectly flat floors, cushioned soles, rigid arch support, minimal toe movement, reduced ankle mobility, for years at a time. A sensory system designed for complexity has been surviving on silence. Imagine placing a hand inside a thick padded glove for 20 years. Eventually, the hand would still exist physically, but the brain's representation of it would begin degrading. This is partially what happens inside modern footwear, not because shoes are evil, but because the nervous system adapts to the information it receives, or fails to receive. Soft soles reduce mechanical deformation of the skin. Rigid support reduces intrinsic foot muscle activity. Narrow toe boxes compress natural toe splay. Highly cushioned heels alter loading timing through the ankle and calf. The receptors still exist, but their language becomes quieter. The cortex responds accordingly. Neuroplasticity is brutally efficient. The brain reallocates resources away from underused input. What disappears first is not strength. It is resolution, the ability to detect subtle shifts. The body begins relying more heavily on vision to maintain balance. That sounds harmless until you understand what happens next. Vision is slow. Compared to mechanoreceptors in the feet, visual processing lags dramatically. A foot receptor can initiate spinal reflex adjustments in under 50 milliseconds. Visual balance corrections often require 180 to 250 milliseconds. That delay matters, especially after age 50, because falls are rarely caused by one catastrophic mistake. They are usually caused by delayed correction. The body sensed instability too late. This is why many older adults begin staring at the ground while walking. Their nervous system no longer fully trusts proprioception, the internal sense of body position. So vision compensates. The eyes become substitute feet. But vision was never designed for millisecond-level balance stabilization. Especially in low light, uneven terrain, crowded environments, the consequences become measurable. Walking speed declines, stride length shortens, toe clearance decreases by millimeters, reaction time slow, ankle stiffness rises. Researchers studying aging populations repeatedly find something fascinating. Walking speed predicts mortality surprisingly well, not because walking itself is magical, but because gait reveals nervous system integrity. A slow, unstable gait often reflects degraded sensory processing throughout the entire body. The feet stopped talking clearly, the brain adapted, then the rest of the body reorganized around the loss. Posture changes. Breathing mechanics change, even the neck changes, because balance is a whole body negotiation against gravity, and gravity never stops negotiating back. The human body is essentially an inverted pendulum. Every second you stand upright, you are technically falling. Tiny muscles and reflex loops continuously prevent collapse. Your feet are the first negotiators in this agreement with gravity. Pressure shifts beneath the big toe activate stabilization chains through the calf, glutes, spinal musculature, and even eye positioning systems. Wait, eye positioning? Yes, because balance is not located in one organ. It is a conversation between three major systems: vision, the vestibular system in the inner ear, and proprioception, sensory input from muscles, joints, and skin. The brain constantly cross-checks all three. If one becomes unreliable, the others compensate, but compensation has a metabolic cost. More muscular co-contraction, more stiffness, higher energy expenditure during movement. This is why some people feel exhausted after standing or walking long periods as they age. Their nervous system is running expensive backup systems all day long. A body with poor sensory resolution moves defensively. The muscles become cautious, rigid, protective, and slowly movement loses fluidity. Not because the system was broken, because it was underinformed. There's another layer beneath this, one most people never feel happening. Fascia, an enormous continuous web of collagen-rich connective tissue wrapping every muscle, nerve, blood vessel, and organ in the body. For decades, fascia was treated as packaging material. Now we know it is heavily innervated. A sensory organ itself, fascia transmits tension across distant regions of the body, like a biomechanical communication network. The plantar fascia beneath your foot connects upward through the calves, hamstrings, pelvis, spinal fascia, even into the scalp through interconnected fascial lines. One restricted region alters tension elsewhere. This is why limited toe mobility can eventually influence hip mechanics, or why stiff ankles subtly alter spinal loading patterns during walking. The body is not a stack of isolated parts. It is a tensescrity structure, a living architecture stabilized through distributed tension, and movement maintains the hydration and sliding properties of fascia. Without varied movement, fascia stiffens, collagen fibers lose organization, water content changes, layers stop gliding efficiently. People describe this sensation as tightness. But often what they are feeling is altered sensory and mechanical behavior inside connective tissue itself. Then the brain interprets that altered input as threat. More guarding follows. More stiffness, the cycle reinforces itself silently for years. Now consider what happens after decades of sensory reduction. By age 40, many people already show measurable declines in foot strength and toe flexibility. By 50, nerve conduction velocity begins slowing naturally. Muscle mass declines, mechanoreceptor density decreases. Reaction times lengthen. This alone would challenge balance. But modern sensory deprivation compounds the problem. The brain enters later life with a lower resolution body map than it evolved to maintain. And then something extraordinary happens. The nervous system begins simplifying movement. Older adults often reduce ankle motion during walking and rely more heavily on hip strategies for balance recovery. Why? Because the feet and ankles stop being trusted as precise sensors. The body moves control higher upward, like transferring steering from fine fingertips to large shoulder movements. More stable, less precise, less efficient. Falls become more likely not simply because muscles weakened, but because the predictive map degraded. The body could no longer forecast terrain changes fast enough. Again, the system was not merely weak, it was less informed. Then researchers began noticing something surprising. When older adults started exposing their feet to richer sensory environments again, changes occurred far faster than expected. Not years, sometimes weeks. Improved balance scores, better toe strength, enhanced gait stability, reduced fear of falling. Because the nervous system remains plastic far longer than people assume, the brain is constantly asking one question. Is this information important enough to dedicate territory to? And the answer depends on repetition, attention variation, novel sensory input. Take off a shoe and walk slowly across grass after years of rigid flooring. At first, it feels almost uncomfortable. Pebbles feel aggressive, the textures feel exaggerated. Tiny muscles fatigue rapidly. That discomfort is not necessarily damage. Often it is reawakened sensitivity. Dormant circuits receiving information again. The mechanoreceptors begin firing with higher variability. Intrinsic foot muscles reactivate. Toe splay widens pressure distribution. Ankle stabilizers engage reflexively. The spinal cord updates movement predictions. Then the cortex starts reallocating attention back toward the feet. Neuroplastic remapping begins. Inside the brain, neurons that fire together strengthen together. Repeated sensory input enlarges representation. This is measurable. Musicians show enlarged cortical regions for finger control. Braille readers develop extraordinary tactile maps. The same principle applies to the feet. Use shapes the map. And something remarkable occurs when sensory richness returns. Movement efficiency improves before muscle hypertrophy fully occurs, because coordination upgrades first. The nervous system becomes less noisy. Reflex timing sharpens. Muscles stop fighting each other unnecessarily. Energy expenditure decreases. Walking becomes smoother, more elastic, less conscious. The body begins trusting itself again. This is why some individuals suddenly feel lighter after restoring foot mobility or practicing barefoot balance training. Not because gravity changed, because prediction improved. The nervous system hates uncertainty. When sensory information becomes clearer, the body releases unnecessary tension. Even blood flow changes. Every step acts like a hydraulic pump. The arches compress and recoil, assisting venous return from the lower limbs. Toe flexion activates muscular contractions that help move blood upward against gravity. Restricted foot movement reduces part of this pumping efficiency. Sedentary behavior compounds it further. Circulation slows. Tissue nutrition changes. Nerves receive less oxygen-rich blood supply. And nerves are metabolically expensive tissue. They degrade quietly under chronic underuse. Movement is not simply mechanical exercise. It is biological communication. Each step tells the nervous system, this territory still matters. Without that message, the map fades. There's a reason children naturally move barefoot whenever possible. The developing brain craves sensory resolution. Children spread their toes instinctively, grip surfaces reflexively, adapt rapidly to terrain. The nervous system is gathering data at enormous scale. Then adulthood gradually places the body inside controlled, predictable environments, climate-controlled rooms, flat flooring, chairs, vehicles, cushioned soles. The sensory bandwidth narrows, and eventually many people stop noticing the ground entirely, until balance declines, until stiffness appears, until walking becomes cautious, until fear enters movement. Then aging seems to arrive all at once. But much of the process began decades earlier in silence. None of this means every person should suddenly abandon modern footwear. That misses the point entirely. The nervous system does not require suffering. It requires information, variation, tutluv diversity, toe movement, balance challenges, natural mechanics reintroduced progressively. Even small interventions change neural behavior. Standing barefoot on varied surfaces for minutes daily, slow controlled single-leg balance work, toe spreading exercises, walking on grass, improving ankle mobility, reducing unnecessary support when appropriate. These are not merely muscular exercises. They are sensory rehabilitation. The goal is not tougher feet. The goal is a richer conversation between the body and the brain. And when that conversation returns, strange things begin happening. People often report improved posture without consciously correcting posture, because the nervous system reorganizes from the ground upward. Breathing becomes deeper. Stride length increases naturally. The neck relaxes. Even visual stability can improve because balance systems integrate more efficiently. The body spends less energy searching for certainty. You begin to understand something profound. Your experience of physical aging is partly an experience of sensory fading. The world became less physically detailed to the nervous system, and the nervous system adapted to that reduced detail. Right now, beneath you, your feet are still sending signals, tiny electrical pulses traveling through peripheral nerves at over 150 miles per hour. Pressure maps updating continuously, reflexes preparing silently, muscles coordinating before conscious awareness catches up, an ancient biological navigation system still waiting for meaningful terrain, still waiting for variability, still waiting for the brain to listen again. And perhaps the strangest realization of all is this. For most of human history, the ground was never just something we walked on. It was part of the nervous system itself. There is one more piece to this story, a darker one. Because when the brain loses sensory detail from the feet, it does not simply affect movement. It changes perception itself. The world begins feeling subtly farther away. Not emotionally, physically. People often describe this sensation without realizing what they are describing. I don't feel stable anymore. I'm more cautious on stairs. I hate walking on uneven ground. I just don't trust my balance. Trust. That word appears constantly in studies of aging and movement. And trust is a neurological calculation. Your brain continuously estimates the probability that your body can survive the next step safely. Every movement is a prediction model. Every staircase, every curb, every wet tile floor. The nervous system asks, how certain am I that the body knows where it is? If certainty drops, behavior changes immediately. Stride shortens, muscles stiffen, speed decreases, head position lowers. Fear is often not the beginning of physical decline. Fear is the nervous system detecting reduced prediction accuracy. The body becomes conservative because uncertainty is expensive. This is why falls in older adults are so psychologically devastating. Not only because of injury, but because a fall destroys confidence in the predictive system itself. After a serious fall, people frequently walk differently even after tissues heal. The brain remembers uncertainty. Protective movement patterns emerge. Joint stiffness increases. Reflexes become overprotective. Ironically, this defensive rigidity can increase instability further. A flexible system absorbs errors better than a rigid one. Think about walking across ice. The people who freeze completely often fall harder. The nervous system works similarly. Healthy balance is dynamic, fluid, adaptive, not rigid, not perfectly controlled. Aging bodies often lose this fluid adaptability first, and sensory deprivation accelerates the process quietly for decades. Inside the cerebellum, the brain region heavily involved in coordination and prediction, millions of calculations occur every second. Expected movement is constantly compared against actual sensory feedback. If the prediction matches reality, movement feels smooth. If prediction errors increase, movement becomes cautious and metabolically expensive. This is one reason neurological fatigue rises with age. The brain is spending more energy resolving uncertainty. What used to be automatic becomes computationally demanding. Even standing still is surprisingly difficult. You are never actually still. Tiny oscillations continuously ripple through the body, forward, backward, side to side. The nervous system constantly corrects these movements through microscopic muscle adjustments. A healthy foot detects these shifts instantly, but when sensory resolution decreases, oscillations become larger before correction occurs. Balance becomes less precise. Researchers can measure this directly using force plates beneath the feet. The sway patterns change. The body begins drifting farther before recovery, often years before visible symptoms appear. Again, the decline begins invisibly. And then there is the toe, the most ignored structure in modern movement, especially the big toe. Hallux, a biomechanical lever so important that losing proper big toe function alters the entire gait cycle. During walking, the big toe should extend roughly 50 to 60 degrees. This extension tensions the plantar fascia through something called the windlass mechanism. Like tightening a cable beneath the foot, the arch stiffens, elastic recoil increases. Forward propulsion becomes efficient. Without proper toe extension, the foot loses spring behavior. The body compensates upward. Knees rotate differently. Hips absorb altered forces. Spinal mechanics subtly shift. All because one joint stopped moving correctly. Wait, what does that mean? It means your neck stiffness may partially involve your toes. Your lower back fatigue may partially involve sensory degradation in the soles of your feet. Not because the body is fragile, because the body is interconnected at extraordinary scale. The nervous system does not think in isolated body parts. It thinks in movement patterns. Modern footwear changed those patterns dramatically. Some shoes effectively immobilize the foot. Thick soles mute texture. Rigid midsoles reduce flexion. Toe boxes compress natural spreading. Imagine wearing gloves so stiff your fingers barely moved for 20 years. Your hands would weaken. But more importantly, your brain would stop expecting dexterity from them. That expectation matters. Motor output depends heavily on sensory expectation. The brain controls what it believes is possible. This is why restoration often feels awkward initially. The system is recalibrating. Tiny stabilizing muscles that remained mostly silent suddenly reactivate. Neural timing changes. Reflex loops sharpen. At first, the feet fatigue quickly because the nervous system is relearning resolution. Not unlike restoring circulation to a sleeping limb. Pins and needles, awareness, strange vividness, the territory was never dead. It was underused, and perhaps nowhere is this more visible than in balanced training experiments. When older adults perform simple barefoot sensory tasks, standing on textured surfaces, balancing on one leg, slow multidirectional stepping, something fascinating occurs inside the nervous system. Reaction timing improves. Not just in the feet, throughout the body. Because sensory systems integrate globally, the spinal cord becomes more responsive. Vestibular coordination improves. Muscle activation sequences become cleaner. Even cognitive performance can improve slightly after movement-based sensory training. Why? Because the brain evolved expecting movement-rich sensory input. Movement stimulates attention networks. Blood flow increases. Neurochemical signaling changes. The body and brain were never separate systems. They are the same system viewed from different angles. Then there is the skin itself. The sole of the foot contains specialized receptors called Merkel cells, Meissner corpuscles, Ruffini endings, and Pacinian corpuscles. Each detects different forms of information. Some detect sustained pressure. Some detect vibration. Some detect stretch. Some detect rapid changes in texture. Together, they create astonishing sensory resolution. A healthy foot can detect surface differences smaller than a millimeter. That information travels upward through ascending neural pathways into cortical maps that update your body position continuously. You are effectively scanning the earth with every step. Most people never realize this because the process is unconscious. The nervous system hides complexity whenever possible. Consciousness only notices failure. But under the surface, billions of calculations unfold silently every day. Now imagine depriving this system of complexity for 40 years, not complete deprivation, just reduction. Enough to slowly lower bandwidth, enough to make terrain less detailed, enough for the brain to conclude, this information is no longer critically important. Cortical territory shrinks gradually, not catastrophically, quietly. The map fades like an old photograph left in sunlight. Then one day someone reaches their 60s and notices they avoid uneven ground, or they need railings more often, or they feel strangely disconnected from movement itself. And they assume this is simply age. But the story began much earlier. The nervous system had been adapting all along. The remarkable thing is how responsive the system remains. Even late in life, neuroplasticity never fully disappears. An 80-year-old brain still changes structurally in response to repeated sensory experience. Slower than a child's brain, yes, but still adaptive, still listening. Studies on balance rehabilitation repeatedly show measurable improvements in stability, gait confidence, and proprioception in older adults after targeted sensory motor training, because neurons respond to relevance. And relevance is created through repeated meaningful input. The brain is economical, not cruel. It reallocates resources based on usage. Give it rich information again, and it starts rebuilding the map. You can almost feel this happening during slow barefoot walking on natural terrain. At first, the ground feels noisy. Cold patches, pressure points, tiny stones, grass bending unpredictably beneath the skin. Then gradually, something changes. The nervous system stops resisting the information. The feet soften, the ankles loosen. The body begins making subtle anticipatory adjustments before conscious thought arrives. Reflexes synchronize. Movement regains rhythm. The earth starts feeling physically detailed again, and for a moment, you experience something modern life nearly erased. Direct conversation between the nervous system and the ground. This may be why natural terrain feels psychologically calming to many people, not merely because it is beautiful, but because the sensory system evolved there. Forest, sand, rock, soil. These environments generate rich low-level variability the nervous system recognizes deeply. Predictable indoor environments reduce cognitive load temporarily, but biologically the brain also starves in perfect uniformity. Human physiology was built inside complexity. The nervous system expects texture, variation, micro-instability, subtle unpredictability. Without it, the body becomes less adaptable over time. And adaptability may be one of the most important biological traits of all, because aging is not simply accumulation of damage, it is narrowing possibility, reduced movement options, reduced recovery options, reduced sensory options. A younger nervous system can solve more physical problems, steep awkwardly, recover instantly, adapt unconsciously. An older understimulated system often cannot recover as efficiently because the map contains less precision, less detail, less redundancy. And redundancy is survival. Nature builds backup systems everywhere. But backups weaken when unused. The body preserves what experience repeatedly proves necessary. So perhaps the real story is not that modern humans lost strong feet. It is that the brain slowly stopped expecting rich sensory dialogue from them. The map faded because the territory grew silent. And yet the circuitry remains astonishingly alive beneath the surface. Waiting for texture, waiting for variability, waiting for challenge, waiting for the return of meaningful information. Right now, beneath layers of skin and fascia, thousands of receptors are still monitoring pressure shifts smaller than grains of sand. Tiny electrical storms still race toward your spinal cord. The architecture is still there, ancient, adaptive listening. And somewhere inside your cortex, the territory representing your feet still exists like a dimly lit city at night. Not gone, just quiet waiting for the signals to return.